in order to get some, focus on a program I was launching. It would take me forever to try and craft the proper graphic and get the dimensions right and add some text to it and, get that uploaded into my blog. That took me forever. Yes, I figured out how to do it. But, if you consider, I bill out at around $200 to $400 an hour. I pay a virtual assistant who is very, very efficient at this and very skilled and knowledgeable, around $35 or $40 an hour, and it takes her 5 minutes.
Exactly. I know exactly the feeling.
It's crazy.
Right.
Yeah.
I know exactly. And even sometimes it's people working with you. I remember in my first business, I had a chain of career schools, and I used to schedule classes a certain way. And one of the new teachers, brand new teachers, looked over my shoulder one day and said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Well, I'm scheduling classes." And she said, "But why are you doing it like that?" And I said, "Well, I don't know. That's just the way I've always done it." And she said, "Well, what about," and she showed me a new way that cut out over 2 hours a week from my scheduling. And I thought, wow, a brand new person that really doesn't have any bias, and they're doing it far better than I ever could have done it. So it's true.
Yeah.
But, you also talk about work-life balance. And I have read so many articles on work-life balance in the last 6 months. I think it's on everybody's mind. And there are people who say, yes, you can have work-life balance. There are people who say no. And I do believe you can have it. But I think it's different for every single individual, because people would not want my schedule. People would not want your schedule. They want their own schedule. So if you don't let other people tell you how it should be, I think it's achievable. But I'm just wondering where you come in on this.
I have two great examples for you. Two of the contributors in our book. One is Julie Cole. She is a very amazing parenting blogger and a co-founder of a company called Mabel's Labels, which is huge. And she does a lot of parenting blogging and lifestyle blogging and writing and stuff. Anyway, she is a mother of 6 children, including one autistic son. And her husband travels. He's a consultant. He's on the road about 5 out of the 7 days a week. And she had such a great response. We're like, one of the chapters in the book is on self-care, right? Because if we're in it for the long haul, we don't want it just a successful company for the next 3 years. We want you to feel successful, and we want it to be sustainable. And so we were talking to Julie. We said, Julie, could you give us a quote about how you handle self-care? I just loved her quote. She was like, as a mom of 6 kids with a husband on the road all the time, I don't have high needs in this area. My idea of self-care is chatting with my kids while I'm driving one to hockey and the other one to soccer. I'm in a van. We're chatting. It feels good. That's about all I need. Oh, and maybe a shower now and then. And I'm not getting her quote exactly right, but it's something like that. Like, she has minimal needs for self-care. Her life, to me, looks crazy from the outside looking in, and I admire and respect the heck out of her. And then another woman that we interviewed said, one day I return all my emails. The other day, my toilets are clean. That's what I call balance. I was like,
well, see, and that's true.
So,
yeah. So that's exactly right. I mean, it's different for everybody. And I think the other part of that is when people say you can have it all. But again, it depends on what having it all means to the individual, because my having it all is not your having it all. So I think it's an interesting look at this. So what do you think is the best and the worst part of being a mom business owner?
Well, I got to say, this is not necessarily the hardest part for me. The hardest part for me is just I want a huge staff and a huge team around me all the time to implement all of the great ideas I have. I think that's one of the hardest parts about just being an entrepreneur is not being able to execute on all of the ideas you have, because I have to make priorities about how I spend my money, how I grow my team. And at the end of the day, there is just, I'm probably not going to run out of more ideas. I'm probably going to keep coming up with those. And it is very hard to let go of them sometimes. It's like, oh, we could do this. But, oh, wait, I've got all these other goals and metrics that I've set in place in my plan, and I've got to stick to that, because I can't just go throw a whole bunch of resources over on this new idea, this new bright, shiny object. So I would say that's one of the hard things for me. One of the things that shows up for a lot of the clients I work with, though, is guilt. And I hope the book helps eradicate this as much as possible, because the idea for a lot of moms seems to still be that if I love my work, like I feel kind of guilty for it because I feel like, I'm choosing work over my kids or over my family, and that makes me feel a little bit bad because sometimes my kids drive me nuts and my clients make me really happy.
and vice versa. Vice versa.
Right. It's like, absolutely. And, so I think that the motherhood guilt thing it creeps in everywhere sometimes. And, we need to manage that. We need to dial it back because generally it's not well-founded. It really isn't.
I recently gave a speech that said how to 5 ways to say no without feeling guilty. And five ways to say no and still feel respected. I think that's a very tough thing for women to do, is to say no. I think men are much better at it than we are. But yeah. I mean, what
I'd love to hear that talk.
Well,
that's so powerful.
You also, as a kind of a last piece of advice, if you're a mom and you're thinking of starting a business, what do you need to know before you jump in? Because sometimes I really do think, Lara, that people who just jump in and go for it are even more successful than people who plan and think. And, I've talked to people and they say, well, I've got my corporate, I've formed my corporation, and I've got my business cards, and I've got my website up, and, all the things that you need. And they haven't done anything yet. So where do you stand on that?
It sounds like you and I are birds of a feather, Gail. I'm all for skidding in sideways. I'm not, so I'm a coach. I set goals. I create a plan. I stay in action on my plan. So I do that. But I am pretty loosey-goosey, disorganized in a lot of other ways in my life that allow me to be creative. And, the whole idea of getting, spending a whole lot of time prepping and getting everything perfect and right and ready before you do anything in your business is a little crazy for me. I'm a big fan of a minimum viable product, whether that be your brand, your website, your service offering. I mean, I have convinced people who didn't think they were ready to go ahead and just ask somebody to hire them and then be shocked, completely shocked that they could get hired despite not having business cards and a website. Like, you don't need that. I mean, I absolutely am going to get you to have that because I absolutely believe it's, important as you go, but it's not important to get started. I would say the biggest thing for getting started is, again, start with a little bit of the self-reflection. Why are you doing this? Why? Like, what do you want this business, this vision to do for you? What's its purpose? And how does that fit into the other goals that you have for the rest of your life? I'm more interested in that because the different whats and hows, those sort themselves out once we get this big vision figured out and we fit the pieces in so that they don't collide and conflict with the other pieces of our life along the way.
Well, I totally agree with you. I totally agree with you. Well, let me ask you now, where can people go to find you? Where can they go to get your book?
Yeah. The book is available in stores everywhere. Barnes & Noble is featuring us for a couple of weeks on their business books table, so you can look at it. There should be a stack of them sitting there. But you can also find it on our website with links to all of the online retailers that you can buy from there. The website for the book is momsmeanbusinessbook.com. You're welcome to sign up. We give out our newsletter, so to speak, is weekly permission slips. And we call them permission slips because we are trying to give women the permission they need to have life look the way they want it to look and to design a business that looks successful according to them. So go sign up on the website there, and you can get those permission slips delivered to your inbox every week.
Fantastic. Well, my guest has been Lara Galloway, and you've been listening to Women in Business, the show that brings you women entrepreneurs and senior managers. I hope you enjoyed our show today. You can connect with me on Facebook and Twitter, and be sure to download my book, Life Lessons from an SOB, on my website, spunkyoldbroad.com, where you can find information on my speeches, coaching, and resources. You can email me at Gayle, that's Gayle, carson13@gmail.com. I want to thank Lara again for being with us today, and thanks everybody for listening today to Women in Business.